Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Expat Edge podcast.
Welcome to the Expat Edge with Marcus and Matt, where we answer your questions about becoming an expat to help you thrive abroad.
Today, Marcus and I are going to talk about getting around and traveling by car in Europe, both for those who are coming to visit for a short period of time, nomads who are living in Europe for maybe a longer period of time, and then also those who are permanently based in Europe. Marcus, you have way more experience with this than I do. I have driven actually quite a bit around Europe, but you live there permanently. And your relatively new hobby is taking camper vans all around Europe. So you have a ton of driving experience in many more countries than I do. But today, let's try to talk about how easy it is to do this. And I think before we get into it, I want to just say it's quite interesting, but you've started this new company called Car Turf to help people, and we'll get into talking more about that as we go along in the video, so stick around. Marcus has quite a unique offering for people who need cars living in Europe.
Yeah, I grew up in Oregon, and my dad's relatives lived in Utah, and so we would take that road trip. My family has 8 people in it. I have 5 brothers and sisters, so we would all jump in this old I don't know what it was, a 78 Dodge van, and we would drive the 12-13 hours to Utah and visit all our relatives and stuff. We'd do that probably almost every summer. So from a young age, we were on the road. We went fishing and camping, and these places you can only get to in a car, and just the culture of the U.S. You just have a car. And
for me, it was exactly the same. We lived in Maine. And both my mom and my dad's relatives, they lived in Pennsylvania. At least once a year, we would drive the 12 hours from middle of Maine all the way down to Pennsylvania. So I was very used to that. We also had a camper that we used to take all around the U.S. and Canada and the Northeast. So I'm also quite used to that, although I haven't done it so much in my own adult life.
Yeah, I don't know. I just I'm not a car guy per se. Like, I don't, know all the ins and outs of cars. My dad fixes cars up. He's always done his own maintenance and things like that. And I don't think any of our family has really picked up on that, unfortunately. But, I just like driving. I don't know what it is about driving, but I like going on road trips. And, I remember just when I was a young adult, I went to on several road trips. Like, we went to Crater Lake in Oregon, several hours away from where I grew up. A couple friends and I went to Vegas. When I was first married, my wife and I went down through Utah to Zion's National Park, through Vegas, and then through California, up the coast through Monterey, and then the Redwoods, and then Southern Oregon, and then kind of into Portland where my family's from. And I just really, really like the fact that you can stop whenever and go at your own pace. That's really what I like about it.
Well, I think the US and Europe are probably the only 2 parts of the world where there's true infrastructure for driving almost everywhere. Now, Europe obviously has much better public transportation than the US, but the US, I think, even the driving infrastructure is even better than Europe, even though Europe is way more crammed into a smaller space. But I mean, both places just offer so many opportunities for travel by car, and it's spectacular. One of my favorite trips that I ever did, and I honestly always prefer international vacations, but we traveled from Boston to Los Angeles with one of my very good friends from college, and it was a blast. I was expecting it to be interesting, but a bit boring after a few days. But the US is so varied. But then you go to Europe, and each one of the states that you cross through is actually another country, not just another state.
So we moved here from Moscow in 2019, and just within a couple of hours you can drive to a different country. And it's very different because at first you don't really notice because there's no borders, right? It's all EU. Well, I mean, we haven't gone to
Serbia,
right? We haven't gone to the non-EU countries. It's a little bit far for us at this point, but within a few hours, I think a couple weeks ago, I was driving with maybe a month and a half ago, actually. I was driving with my youngest daughter from Lyon, France, back up to Germany through Luxembourg. And I think we were on the phone for a little bit there. And I was like, yeah, I just passed through 3 countries today, basically. They speak different languages, there's different food, and they're neighbors.
The signs are in different languages.
Yeah. And so I recently went on a road trip. Like you said, I got into kind of traveling with my wife and I, with my kids, and then now starting with my individual kids, so it's just me and my son, or me and my daughter, in camper vans throughout Europe, and just on short trips, like 5-day trips or something. I went with my son. We went through Germany, through Switzerland, and then down to Como and Milan, and then over to Turin, and then came back. But you go into northern Switzerland, it's Swiss German. Then we're going down where Lugano is, closer to Italy, it's all Italian. And then going through from Aosta up through Saint Bernard, I think it is. Like, that's all French. So like, even within Switzerland,
right,
they speak all 3 languages. I just remember going to the gas station to get one of those vignettes. They call it vignettes. So the sticker that you paid, for the toll roads. And I asked the guy, hey, can I get one of those stickers? And he's like, oh yeah, oui. And I was like, I was kind of expecting Italian because I just came through the Italian part of Switzerland. So it's just really, really a lot more interesting because of the differences in such a short distance.
Absolutely.
The problem, though, is, and I ran into this with having a car in Russia when we were living there. I had a car in Russia, but it had German plates. You never had a car, or
No, I never had a car.
Again, like, you don't. It's not an absolute need in Europe. I just thought, how do people not wanting, they want to travel by car and see all these great places that trains and buses, it's not really feasible to get to. Right. Even, the little towns and little kind of nooks and crannies of Europe. How do you actually get a car? Because, on my budget, I can't rent a car for 6 months. It's just too expensive. Or 3 months. Let's say you're a digital.
It's like $1,000 a month to rent a car from an agency.
I kind of started thinking more about this, and based on my experience with owning a car with German plates in Russia, and I would drive into Finland and Estonia and Latvia and back and forth. I was looking for a solution to offer some kind of advice to people who wanted to come to Europe, and it just wasn't there. Right. I mean, it's like you could lease a car, like a new car, but then it'd be quite expensive. You could rent a car. Obviously, that's the rates per day don't really drop that much, and typically they're all new cars, so it's not like you can get a used car for a really good deal. Thinking of people coming to Europe to travel long term who don't have an address, we started CarTurf.
Yes, and it also alleviates. I wanted to bring up one thing about renting a car in Europe that can be quite frustrating. You can rent a car and request an automatic and show up, and there's only a manual car there. It's happened to me twice in Europe. I thankfully know how to drive a manual, but when you don't drive a manual for years at a time, and then you're just like, here you go. The first 10 minutes are like, until you get the hang of it again. CarTurf is a fantastic service, helping people register their cars in Germany, and they're able to use their cars outside of Germany, for a longer period of time than car renting is maybe feasible for. Maybe you can give a little bit more detail about how it all works. I think our viewers would really like to know exactly what the offering is and how you can help, maybe who the ideal customer is for such a product or service, rather.
Yeah, so I was in this position when I lived in Russia. I wanted a car, but I didn't have an address for my German plates. That I just bought a car, and then I got to Russia. I'm like, wanted to import it, and so I paid 4,200 euros for the car. Yeah. I bought a 2003 Audi A4 wagon from this private seller, and I get to a couple of months yet. I registered it. I had an address in Germany. I registered it. Was driving it. We get to Russia after my second daughter was born, and I'm like, okay, I got the temporary import at the border, and I'm like, okay, how much is this gonna cost? And I got a quote. It's like 6,900 euros to import the car into Russia, and I'm like, okay, never mind. That's like over double the price that I paid for the actual car. So what I ended up doing was I kept the German plates on it, and I drove it, and I just kept extending the temporary imports because I was using it for personal reasons.
Right. But also, you didn't have permanent residence, though. I think one thing that we should note is that a lot of people with permanent residence are not able to do that. So, like, if you're a permanent resident of Russia or a citizen, you can't temporarily import a German car.
Yeah. So when that was kind of like the seed of the idea, right? I was just like, anybody who is a foreigner just visiting Europe really needs and really wants a car. This is an option. They can, because I ended up registering it through my cousin, and it was like, oh, I can do this. Okay, I don't even have to be registered in Germany to do it. So, fast forward to 2022, after COVID and digital nomads and remote workers, like, this huge wave of people working from anywhere. I'm thinking, okay, if I were to do this as a business, who could we serve, right? So I'm thinking anybody working remotely, slow travelers, maybe early retirees, so that there's just so many segments of people that we serve that don't have an address.
Right.
They can't get an address because they're not a citizen, or they don't have an address. They don't even want to keep an address.
Sure.
So at this point, we basically serve anybody without an address or somebody who can't get an address and they want to travel to multiple European countries.
Right. Well, as soon as you told me about this, I remember way back when, I don't remember where I heard about this first, but Porsche, if you buy a Porsche, you can do, I think, what they call a European delivery. So you can actually pick the car up, drive it around Europe. I think there's a time limit on it, like 2 weeks or 3 weeks, something like this. Maybe it's a month. I don't remember. And then you drive it back to the factory, and then they ship it to your home for the same price as if you had just bought it in the U.S. I think there's like a special order charge that you would get if you ordered anything special. But you're able to then, since it comes from Germany, you can just ride it around, and then they send it to your house. And I was thinking, there's got to be a number of people who love that. But if you were able to have that open to all cars, like if you just wanted to go and buy a car, a cheap car, and drive around Europe for 6 months and go everywhere, it's not possible. It's really not possible without an address.
Yeah.
And so immediately when you told me about this idea, I was thinking there's got to be lots of people who are potentially interested in this.
So the interesting thing was, so basically what CarTurf does is it helps a foreigner without an address wanting to travel for any amount of time, really, but
extended periods of time.
We're talking about like months, right? We're not talking like 3+ months, 6+ months, but it really helps somebody buy a car, register a car, and insure a car, because you can do the buying. You can come with
cash,
20,000 euros and buy a car, but you can't drive it off the lot. I mean, you can't. Like, where are you gonna? You can't Okay, so you can get export plates. Like, maximum is like 6 months, and then the insurance is limited to like liability. But if you have an expensive car, you don't want to do that, because if something happens, you lose the value of your car. So there's significant limitations for a foreigner wanting to buy a car. I mean, certainly you could buy a car and then just ship it to the port and ship it home, and then you could register at your address in the U.S. or wherever you're from. But for foreigners wanting to do some sort of travel, or like frequently they come to visit European countries, there's not a good option. And if there is,
I have a question. Yeah. Let's say you're an American and you spend 4 months every year in Portugal. Is this service for you if you don't have permanent residence?
Yes. So we have a number of clients who reach out to us and they're like, I have a camper van in Europe. They already own one. And it's through like a Dutch agent or a French agent or Bulgaria. What they do is basically they have to set up an entity, a legal entity, to buy the car, to own the car. Because they themselves don't have. And they... the fees for that are quite extensive. It's like 5,000 euros, 10,000 euros, depending on what agent.
Per year or once?
Just the upfront cost, and then I don't know what they charge ongoing. But with CarTurf, it's like 99 euros a month. You're just there's no upfront enormous fee to do that. But in your scenario, we have people already doing that. They already have a vehicle, and they're like, I just spend 6 months out of the year in Europe, or I just spend, the summer. So what Germany has, so what we're doing with CarTurf is leveraging like all the best things about Germany, and they have what's called seasonal plates. And one client reached out to us, and they're like, I'm only in Europe April through October. So we just put on seasonal plates, and it's the vehicle tax and the insurance is prorated for just the 7 months.
Huh. Well, that's awesome.
And so, the downside is, of course, that you have to you're in that time period you have to travel, or if you're going to use the vehicle, you are limited to those months. But we could change it any time too. I mean, you could be in Spain with the van, and you just call us up and say, hey, I need different plates. As long as the documents are up to date, we can go to the DMV, get new plates, and ship them, and you continue on your trip.
Interesting.
So it really is for any extended travel, whether you're doing it consecutively or over, throughout the year.
Huh. That's awesome. That's awesome. And then you've got another client, actually, my brother, I think is a client of yours. He's living in Italy for a period of time and doesn't have any way to register. I think in Italy you need more. That you can't just have an address. He's a student, so I don't know what the rules are for him, even if he wanted to register it in Italy, if it's even possible.
Yeah, so it was interesting because I had, when were we talking about this? A long time ago. I was like, I told you, I was like, Matt, what do you think about this idea? I think I'm going to start it. And I kind of gave you the gist of it. And you're like, well, okay, Porsche has that, you mentioned the Porsche program, and you're like, I don't know how many, there's got to be some kind of, but it was really difficult to understand what the demand was.
Yeah.
And then just a few months ago, you're like, hey, my brother's in this situation with his car. And I was like, oh, okay, just have him reach out. So he was in Croatia with the residency permit, had a car, registered everything, but he was switching he was going to Italy. And so it's this cat and mouse game. Same thing with anybody moving to Europe. Even if you're going to get residency, it's like by the time you actually get an address, you're going to have to rent a car for several weeks or a few months until you're like searching for the right apartment or wherever you are, whatever you're going to rent out. And then you can buy a car and register it, at your address. So there's still this buffer of period of time where you have to like shell out lots of money if you want a car.
Yes.
Just to rent it. So we ended up helping your brother out by, he just sent in the documents with the. He drove. He was in Frankfurt already, so he came up with his documents. We gave them the plates. We registered it within 45 minutes. We had his new plates. He could drive. It was all insured and everything. So now he doesn't have to worry about. He can go to any EU country with the German plates, and even outside the EU.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because if you want to travel through Europe, if you want to do a road trip through Europe, you don't have that many options. And the options that are kind of on the market, it's like setting up a company. I'm going to go to Bulgaria and set up a company. It's going to take me, like, let's say you only do 6 months.
Yeah.
You're going to set up a company just for 6 months. I mean, it's worth it financially, but you waste a lot of time.
Sure.
Right, you save a lot and then you're like, how am I gonna sell the car? So the car turf is really the option where you say, okay, I want to buy a car. You can do it remotely. We can help you buy the car, and we'll register, insure it, and then you fly into Europe, wherever you are. We can meet you there. We can ship the car there. You fly in, to Frankfurt, Dusseldorf, Cologne, and you can pick up your car ready to go. That's kind of the whole idea. And then when you're done with your trip, we can help you sell it.
Not to maybe put you on the spot here, but what if somebody wants to buy a car in Czech Republic and they need your help? Can you help with that, or is that not something you would probably help with?
So I always recommend checking out the market in Germany first for multiple reasons. Used cars are generally in way better shape.
Yeah.
They're Germans are meticulous about taking their cars to the shop regularly. That's just kind of the way Germans are. But several people have reached out and say, hey, I have this car in Italy, or I have this car in the Netherlands, or whatever country.
Yeah.
The great thing about the EU is you can buy it. We can't do much for it in the buying process, but the great thing is you don't actually need us in the buying process if you know what car you want.
Okay.
Like if you this one guy reached out and he says, I want this Audi R8.
Yeah.
He's looking at this sports car. He's in Poland. He's like, okay, there's a couple in Germany, a couple in the Netherlands, and this one in Italy. You know, they're sold all over the place. Like the same car is sold all over the EU. All we need is the EU documents, either the previous registration or the current registration. If the plates are still valid, then just we can send in the plates. And then we need the valid safety and emissions inspection. That should be done in Germany. It could be done by a safety and emissions inspection station anywhere in the EU if it follows the EU guidelines.
Got it. Okay. But though that's awesome though. I didn't even know that. We hadn't obviously discussed it before, so that's great to know.
Yeah. So just as some examples, we've had people want to come and tour Europe on a Harley Davidson. They're like, they send the link, and this is what I'm thinking of buying. Is it possible? We're like, okay, yeah, as long as you buy it with the documents, and we get the safety emissions test done, and we can register it, insure it before you even get here. The question is, do you want us to pick it up? You can buy a car through a German dealer fairly safely, not being there.
Yeah.
Like, if you know what car you want. If you don't know what car you want, it's more difficult because you want to come and shop around, especially if you're paying a lot for a car. Let's say you want to travel Europe for a year or less, 6 months to a year. It's like, does it really matter what kind of car, like it has all the bells and whistles that you want because you're just going to sell it anyway, but you know, when you're done, probably not. But if you're a lot of our customers are interested in buying a camper van and using it for 4 or 5 years in Europe. Like either they fly every year for several months or a good portion of the year, or they just live full time in the camper van and drive around Europe. Then of course you're putting a lot of money into it and you want it to be yours, right? So there's that question, like, to weigh whether you want to come and see the car before you buy it or not. But the actual registration we can do once we have the documents, we can do within 1 to 3 business days.
Got it. Well, I think that was a great overview, Marcus, of car turf. I think it's a fantastic idea. I think what we should do is anybody who has further questions, you know, Marcus, you and I, we've talked through this many times. Sometimes it's hard to think about it from a potential customer's point of view. But any of you viewers, if you have questions, leave them below and we'll do another video, sort of question and answer style, to give more information about car turf. And of course, we'll monitor the comments and reply as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of scenarios. The funny thing is, we started car turf, we started getting it out there, and people reached out to us with scenarios we hadn't thought of.
Yeah, I'm sure.
For example, just a couple examples. So UK residents or UK nationals who own vacation homes in the EU after Brexit, it's really difficult to take their car from the UK. They have 30 days in the EU at a time. If they have a vacation home in southern France or Italy, like, you're going to drive back and forth every time? Or, is it easier just to own a simple car at your vacation rental or your vacation property?
Yeah.
So we've had people reach out. I hadn't thought about that. And then another scenario is in Malta and Cyprus, it's very difficult to own a camper van or like a motorhome because Cyprus, you can't get your vehicle on a ferry more if it's longer than 5 or 6. No, it has to be 6 meters or something. So if you have a small motorhome, I mean, not small, but 7 meters, like, that's not huge. Good size. It's not like an American RV. That's what I mean. But like, let's say you have like a 7 meter long motorhome. You can register it in Cyprus, but you can't actually use it because you can't, put it on the ferry.
Sure.
Same thing with Malta. A guy reached out. I was talking to a guy who does a channel, Travel Tales, Chris. We were talking, and he's like, "I'm from Malta, and it's just I can't park it in a lot of places in Malta." So there's really a lot of scenarios that car turf is really flexible. You can do any vehicle, you can do any amount of time, and it's just a matter of, are you paying the insurance and the vehicle tax? Then we can register it.
Got it. Well, that's awesome. Well, Marcus, thanks for walking us through car turf. I wish you only very good luck. And like I said, if anybody has any questions for Marcus, let us know in the comments below, and we will do another question and answer video getting more in depth into what Marcus is setting up with car turf. We'll see you.
Happy to answer questions.
And we'll see you in another video.
This was the Expat Edge with Matt and Marcus. We hope you enjoyed the video. Visit theexpatedge.com for even more content that will help you thrive abroad. You can submit your ideas for video topics and sign up for free at theexpatedge.com. See you there.